Hello and welcome. I'm Ijoma Onyaso. Tonight, President Buhari criticizes past administrations for the mismanagement of the nation's economy, queries over $15 billion allegedly spent on power by a former head of state without result. Vice President Obasanjo seeks revamp of nation's security architecture as Catholic priests lead nationwide protests against killings in parts of the country. CBN Monetary Policy Committee leaves all rates unchanged for the 16th time in a row over fears of budget implementation and election spendings. And President Trump says North Korea must meet certain conditions before historic talks begin.
On Business News tonight, Central Bank of Nigeria plans to unveil operational framework for the currency swap deal with China next week.
On sports news, Central LGEA Primary School from Kwara State becomes the first school to qualify for the quarterfinals of this year's Channels International Kids Cup.
And from Abuja, trial of former PDP spokesperson Olisa Metuh continues in Abuja despite his absence in the court.
President Muhammadu Buhari has queried the over $15 billion allegedly spent on power projects in the country with nothing to show for it. In a veiled reference to former President Olusegun Obasanjo, President Buhari said a former head of state had been bragging about spending more than $15 billion on power in Nigeria. The president was addressing the Buhari support group led by the Comptroller General of the Nigerian Customs Service, Mr. Hamid Ali. Our correspondent Gloria Umezoke reports.
One of the former heads of state between that time was bragging that he spent more than 15 billion American dollars, not naira, on power. Where is the power? Where is the power?
President Muhammadu Buhari raising questions about the poor state of the nation's power sector after a whopping $16 billion spent by a former president who he clearly thinks has no bragging rights after huge investments gone down the drain in a national integrated power project.
Now we have to pay the debt. And this year's and last year's budget I took to the National Assembly was the highest in capital projects. More than 1.3 trillion naira. Let anybody come and confront me publicly in the National Assembly. What have they been doing? Some of them have been there for 10 years. What have they been doing?
The president bemoaned the colossal waste of funds accrued from $2.1 billion per day on crude oil sales, as he discovered upon assumption of office in 2015.
So Nigeria was earning 2.1 million times 100 times 16 years, 7 days a week. I went to the governor of Central Bank. Thank goodness I did not sack him. He was still there. I went with my cap in my hand. I said, where? He says there was no saving, only debt.
He criticized the manner in which the elites send their children to school abroad, as well as owning houses, while the economy remains destroyed.
The people are saying, what are we doing? Why can't we lock them up? When I was in uniform, I got from the president down, I locked them in Kirikiri. I said, you are guilty unless you can prove yourself innocent.
The president says he has nothing to regret as he is working assiduously to consolidate on the gains made so far, especially to bring the nation back to her feet. Gloria Umezoke, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, former President Olusegun Obasanjo has reacted to the president's claim that a past administration spent more than $15 billion on power projects with no power to show for it. Chief Obasanjo believes the criticism was targeted at his administration and reacted to it in a statement a few hours after President Buhari's comments were published. In the statement signed by the Director of Strategic Communications of the Coalition for Nigeria movement founded by Chief Obasanjo, the former president accused President Buhari of playing politics with statistics. The statement reads, quote, A presidential panel headed by the then VP Goodluck Jonathan, set up by the Umaru Yar'Adua government, put a lie to this after the same administration had sacked one engineer Shomolu, the then secretary of the NIPP, who first drew attention to the lie that $16 billion had been spent on power projects, end of quote. He wondered why the president, who has all the correct information at his disposal, would descend to the level of what he describes as gossip. Meanwhile, the president says ongoing efforts by his administration are beginning to pay off as he announced increased foreign reserve of $47.5 billion as at May the 15th, 2018, as against $29.6 billion in May 2015. President Muhammadu Buhari, who was speaking during the conferment of the National Productivity Award on 15 individuals and 5 companies, vowed that it would no longer be business as usual as he intensifies the fight against corruption. He directed all ministries, departments and agencies to drive the change agenda in the public sector to guarantee a more producive nation. And the Vice President has called for the revamping and rebuilding of Nigeria's security architecture for greater efficiency. Professor Yemi Osinbajo made the call after the President's Catholic Bishop Conference of Nigeria, Most Reverend Augustine Akabueze, demanded the probe of Nigeria's security architecture, accusing them of underperformance. They were speaking at the Ayati Catholic Pilgrimage Center in Ngwe local government during the burial of 2 priests killed during an attack on worshippers in a church in Benue State.
April 24, 2018. The bloodbath in the Catholic Church in Benue State that shook the nation. In all, 19 people lost their lives on this day. And today, the slain are being laid to rest amidst grief. Members of the Catholic faithful and other mourners have gathered to pay their last respects. The Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, is here to commiserate with the people of Benue State. The speeches are straight to the point. The killings must stop, and those behind it be brought to book.
Those committing this crime should be brought to justice. Those sponsoring it should also be made known. But we must be vigilant to ensure that the enemy does not continue on this path of destruction.
With heaviness in his voice, Governor Samuel Ortom takes to the podium. He can only ask why.
The Reverend Fathers are not farmers. They were not in the farm. The church where they were holding the mass has no grass. It is therefore curious why Reverend Fathers who do not have farm and parishioners who were worshiping God would be killed by herdsmen in the church.
Vice President Osinbajo assures the people that the federal government understands the dire strait of the country's security setup.
But what do we owe the dead today? What do we owe those who died, these 19 who died here in Benue? We must revamp and rebuild our system of law enforcement to ensure that all those who live and work in this land are safe. Most importantly, we must and will stop these senseless killings.
To the residents, those behind the killings may have momentarily dampened their peace of mind. But this song from the crowd appears to be a message that their spirit will not be dead.
Meanwhile, the Catholic Mission Abuja today joined other members across Nigeria in a nationwide prayer and peaceful protest against incessant killings across the country. The protest is in compliance with the directive of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria, asking all its members to participate in a nationwide supplication to God.
The National Christian Center in Abuja is full to capacity with Catholic faithful as the Auxiliary Bishop of the Abuja Diocese conducts a memorial mass for the souls of all innocent victims of attacks, and particularly for 17 worshippers and 2 priests killed in Benue State last month.
We pray for their conversion.
The clerics also used the occasion to task the government on national security.
Those who go to bed with their two eyes closed are murdered in their sleep. We wish to remind you that the basis for the existence of government is the security of lives and properties of its citizens. We are only asking the government to live up to its covenant with the Nigerian people.
The prayers and the protest march that followed are in line with the directive from the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria, instructing all its members to participate in a nationwide protest. A huge number of Catholic faithful filed into the streets in Abuja, displaying placards, condemning the killings and asking the government to intervene urgently.
Enough is enough! Stop this killing now! Stop this killing now! Stop this killing!
Their demands are not different from the messages on their placards. They want the killings to stop immediately.
The government should reach out to the governments of Libya and Mali that they have named as culprits, so that we find either diplomatic solutions to the crisis at home, or we engage our military in military action. We are not in short supply of men or resources.
We are mourning together with the people in Ambalom, where the two priests were killed, and with other followers immediately after Mass, they were all killed. We are calling on the government to rise up to their responsibility, and the killing must stop.
The peaceful protest coincides with the burial of the 17 church members and the 2 priests killed during a mass in Benue State last month. This is indeed a very sad moment for many Nigerians, hence the urgent need for the government to address the situation once and for all.
And the Catholic Mission's nationwide prayer and peaceful protests against incessant killings also held across the nation. Catholic faithful also held processions in Edo, Adamawa, Oyo, Benue, Lagos and other states. All members of the Catholic faith had been directed by the Bishops' Conference of Nigeria to offer supplication to God for the killings of innocent souls in Benue State, particularly the murder of 2 priests and laity during Mass.
It's a peaceful march against the unending killings across the country. They are all from the Catholic faith, acting on the orders of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Nigeria. Their protest is triggered by the murder of 2 priests and 17 other parishioners on April the 24th during a mass in Benue State. In Yola, the Adamawa state capital, solemn-looking worshippers move in a procession before service. The bishop in his sermon is not happy with the federal government over the way the killings are being handled.
The government really needs to come out clearly to condemn whatever kind of killing of human beings.
In Kaduna State, members of the Catholic Diocese assembled at the St. Augustine Catholic Church to hold prayers in honor of the victims. They are joined by Muslim clerics. The congregation then marched the streets of the state capital to vent their frustration over the killings.
Let them repent, and they should know that it's not just here, but that they will stand before God to give account of their lives.
Worshippers in Ilorin, the Kwara state capital, also joined the train. The procession moves through streets in the metropolis. Hundreds of worshippers also marched the streets of Benin in Edo State, carrying placards bearing different inscriptions. Parishioners in Osun and Oyo states marched to the State House of Assembly complex and the Government House respectively to make their demands.
The recession we have peacefully.
It is no different in Lagos and Ogun states, where faithful also kicked against the incessant killings in the country. They appeal to the federal government to live up to its primary responsibility of providing security and safety for every Nigerian.
So we are only making a case and calling on the government to respond, to save lives, to stop the killings, and to bring peace to Nigeria.
Voices of hundreds of people have spoken against the attacks. Their hope is that the authorities urgently address the problem and put an end to the killings.
In part 2, after the break, we examine the central bank MPC's reasons for leaving key rates unchanged. I'll be joined by the CEO of Financial Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Rawani. Do join us again.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Adam, go and bring us your husband. Okay, hello baby. We're in this together, okay? Can you hear me? Keep coming forward. Wait, stop. You okay, leave to your